Question, is anybody quoted to, obviously, or allergic to parrots? I'm supposed to say that. Okay, you got parrots in the room. Parrots, do you have any phobias or allergies to humans? Okay, that's fine. They don't say much. Hello. Oh, he waited. She waited. The little one's a female.
All right, well, this right here, this is Professor Truman, Cape Parrot. He's got a PhD in aeronautics. This is Kili, his teaching assistant. And I'm Michael, the teaching assistant's teaching assistant and translator. So without any further ado, I'd like to make a presentation.
I'm very sorry. I forgot to introduce you. I've been running up and down. And they're still coming in anyway. This is Michael Sazin. He's an ex-college student, he claims that has absolutely nothing to do with any success in life from college.
All right, so sit down.
But then he's also an accomplished pilot and sailplane flyer. He's very much into, obviously, parrots and flight, evolution of birds, learning theory, behavioral theories of learning. So he said most of his life is associated with flight, except he's actually a businessman who says there's no money in flight, so he does computer, internet, service, business industry, his own business. So anyway, that's the introduction. What are you laughing at? He makes money that way.
I was laughing because I saw this episode.
You saw the episode. Okay.
All right, kids, it is now my job to teach you the theory of evolution. Now, I, for one, think that evolution is a bunch of bull crap, but I've been told I have to teach it anyway. It was thought up by Charles Darwin, and it goes something like this. In the beginning, we were all fish, okay, swimming around the water. And then one day, a couple of fish had a retard baby, and the retard baby was different, so he got to live. So retard fish goes on to make more retard babies, and then one day, a retard baby fish crawled out of the ocean with its mutant fish hands, and it had blood sex with a squirrel or something, and made this retard frog squirrel. And then that had a retard baby, which was a monkey fish frog. And then this monkey fish frog had blood sex with that monkey, and that monkey had a mutant retard baby and screwed another monkey, and that made you. So there you go. You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having blood sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
Take a look, it's on display.
And we'll be looking at how flight comes about. How do you go from no idea about how to fly? How do organisms that have no idea what flight is like be able to fly? How do we go with technology where we go from cars and bicycles and not knowing anything about flight to being able to make that jump to flight? You can't really have any middle ground. You try to make some crappy wings, Leonardo da Vinci and all these other great aviators that weren't meant to be, jump off the Eiffel Tower or someplace else, flatten the ground. That doesn't really work, so we're going to look at how evolution dictates the possibility of going from not being able to fly. How do you improve flight capability once you already have it? What can you learn from previous flight experiences? I'm going to look at how manned flight is similar and yet different to avian flight. What conclusions can we get from that? What can we learn from avian flight? I'm also going to talk about differences between the concept of design and something that is very familiar to us as humans and engineers, engineering school, computer scientists. We're very used to designing things, but we're also going to look at how evolution achieves similar means yet in very different methods. And then finally, we're going to look at what we can learn from flying organisms that we can apply to improving our own flight technology. Don, do you have an extra pen back tomorrow? Or do you want to take care of something for me?
Okay.
You can just read on there. You can do this for me. Save me the work.
By the way, he has me as part of the experiment, so I don't know if it's being manipulated now. So I should read this now?
No, just read to yourself and just
Oh,
do it for me.
myself. Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, boy. Okay. Hold on.
so what is design? What can we consider to be intelligent design? Well, if Truman were intelligently designed, he'd have arms as well as wings, then he could write books. It would be great. He could fly around and ponder the essence of the world and put it into writing. But it's very easy to conclude that everything is designed around us because we're so used to designing things. These chairs, desks, pens, buildings, these are all designed by humans. And that's the world we're very much used to. So it's very easy to make that analogy and assume that things in the natural world are also designed in a similar method. But as you'll see in my presentation, we're going to learn that it's quite otherwise. You see, evolution, natural evolution works on an entirely different paradigm than man-made design. And we're going to look at how that method works and see if that method also applies to human design as well. So, as you'll soon see, it's actually impossible to have the wings and the arms together like this, even though this might be very practical. You kind of picture a guinea pig and just have some wings spread out of its back, or a human, and then get some wings on top of that. You get your arms, you get your wings, that's beautiful. But what we're going to find out is that, in fact, wings on birds and other flying organisms evolved from arms, so they had to trade arms for wings, so you can't really have both, because there's only a possibility for either two arms or two wings. That's the constraint. Let me show something real quick. You see, Truman has an adaptation that is alternate to well, he might, there you go. He uses his foot as an arm. So you can see this is quite a poor design. If you were going to be designing an animal to be like this, it would be much more logical to have two arms instead of having to use the same feet that he has to stand on, that he might step into dirty places with. So instead of using those, it would be a heck of a lot better to design with arms. So I think engineers around here would appreciate that this isn't quite the optimal design, but this is within the constraints of evolution. Now, when we talk about aviation design, man-made aviation, the constraints are different, so that allows us a lot more possibilities and flexibility to adapt things. So first I want to talk a little bit about homology. Does anyone know what the term means?
A feature in one organism and a feature in another organism have similarities, like parallel. It's kind of like, like an arm in a human has a similarity to a wing in a bat.
That's a good try. The similarity is definitely a part of it, but it's more than just similarity. It's actually common ancestry. That the similarity is so great that it can be traced back to at one point being identical. So in this picture, you can see the human arm, the bird wing, and the bat arm are very similar. The bones are color-coded. They all have a humerus, they have the radius and ulna. The shape may change a little bit, but they're exactly in the same order. You don't have maybe radius first and then a humerus and then an ulna. That would not be homology. Homology requires that the available forms are directly based off of related forms and structures and others. So quite interestingly, in a bird wing, the arm only goes up to here. These are right here. These are the metacarpals. These are the fingers and the phalanges. So the fingers are actually formed over here. So a good part of the bird wing is, in fact, their fingers rather than just their arms. So the fingers extend even further. On bats, they have very long fingers. So their wings would be very short without the extended fingers. It wouldn't be enough to picture your arm. That's not that much relative to the size of the body. But if you can extend the fingers to double the size of the arm, you get a lot more wing surface area. However, homology can also be seen in aircraft design as well. Does anyone know these two aircraft? Anyone familiar with general aviation? Anyone can name these airplanes? Donald?
That one I know.
King
fluid, yeah. That's a Cessna, so far right?
No.
Okay, I don't know.
Donald, you should know better because you've been in one of these.
Is that the Piper Arrow?
Yeah, this is a Piper Arrow and this is a Piper Seminole. They are actually based on the same design. They can be said to be quite homologous. Essentially what Piper did was they took their popular Cherokee design, made a retractable gear version of it, became the Piper Arrow, and then they modified that to make a twin-engine trainer because they were trying to fill the market. So what they do is they took the engine off of the nose cowling, slapped the same exact engine model on the wings, and made it two of them. So the airfoil is got the same airfoil. The horizontal vertical stabilizers are identical. You can see the amount of space on top of the stabilizer, the shape of the horizontal and vertical stabilizers. You can see that the fuselage is identical. The nose cowling has to be modified. The engines are obviously different. Landing gear, the gear doors and landing gear are the exact same system. So you can see homology in aircraft design as well, where they just take entire structures that are developed and just take the entire package and slap it onto another aircraft. So you can see where one design can be later modified and adapted to provide different purposes. So you have a single-engine multi-engine trainer for the same purpose, for training purposes, based on the same airframe. And then the same thing with in the animal kingdom. You can see where arms and bird and bat wings are all based on a homologous arm structure.
Michael, may I announce to them, I don't know if you did this when I was outside, if they would like to ask questions or make comments,
Sure.
they should do that.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, feel free to do that during this, okay, you're over quiet.
Does anyone recognize what all four of these aircraft have in common? Does anyone want to venture a guess? Gentleman in the red, what do you think? What do all four of these airplanes have that makes them similar? Don't say they fly because, I mean, we're in the aviation course, that's a little obvious. Bingo. These are all tricycle landing gear aircraft. If you're familiar with the earlier designs, there was a lot, what we used to be called conventional gear was actually now we call the tail dragger, which is two wheels in the front and one in the back. Donald, can you name the top left aircraft?
Is that a Curtis? You don't know. Actually, it doesn't look like a Curtis. It's got three square, could be. Although usually he was up on the, yeah, it's a Curtis model.
It's a Curtis Model D. It was built in 1904. It's the first tricycle gear aircraft. So it was 1914. I might have mixed them up, but
14.
Yeah, I think it's 14, right?
Yeah,
1914.
that he sold those.
Right, 1914. So it didn't take very long to come up with the tricycle landing gear. However, it didn't become popularized until after World War II, or during and after World War II. So just because the design is invented doesn't mean it goes straight to use. Does anyone know what this aircraft is? You don't know?
Ah, jeez, what am I doing?
It's the Tri-Pacer.
not a Cessna.
It's a tripacer. It's a Piper tripacer.
Piper, yeah, that's a Cessna up there?
Yeah, it's a Cessna 150.
It's Piper, okay.
So they were the conventional or tail dragger gear design was popular in the 30s and 40s, probably because the aircraft weren't too good, and when you're crashing and you're kind of slamming in on things, the conventional gear was just better at arresting the shock. There are other disadvantages. I'm not really going to get too much into that, but the tripacer is an interesting aircraft because it's right on the borderline between tail dragger and tricycle gear aircraft. What's kind of funny is you can see the main landing gear look exactly like tail dragger gear. In fact, they are, and they were turned around. These were here before, and they had a tail wheel. So this was originally designed as a tail wheel aircraft that was swapped into a tricycle gear design. So they just made some very small modifications. They turned the gear around, brought it back a little, put in a nose wheel, and turned this into a tricycle gear design, which ended up being more popular than the tail wheel design. And engineers have to later take that into consideration when designing new aircraft, that the tricycle gear became easier to train on, learning curve is better, and visibility is better, because the nose doesn't sit high up, with the tail down, the nose doesn't sit high, so you could actually see forward on these, whereas on the conventional aircraft you couldn't. And then future designs incorporated the tricycle gear almost by default. You got your Cessna 150, a very popular trainer since the 50s, and does anyone venture a guess? Is anyone familiar with this model? This is very new. Only been around for about 10, 15 years.
Cessna?
Actually, no. This is a Cirrus. It's a Cirrus SR-22. It's a composite airframe, and it's known as, among the aviation community, it's affectionately known as the doctor killer. Because to buy one of these, you got to be a doctor and have that kind of cash. And they're just too busy, and they're really good at what they do. When they get into aircraft, they might be a little impatient. They might be wowed by the gadgets. So they get into a high-speed, high-performing aircraft without the requisite experience. And so you hear about a lot of these in the news crashing. So whenever you read a newspaper article and says, well-known doctor so-and-so perished in an aircraft accident, well, it turns out it was one of these that they came in too fast to land and slammed the gear in and maybe hit the prop, and they try to go around, and half the prop got busted on the landing, and then they go around and then they crash into trees or something. So it's the infamous Cirrus SR-22 doctor killer. But the reason I bring all these designs to your attention is to show how design can be cross-adapted from different aircraft. Unlike natural evolution, which I'll get to in a little bit, you can actually take a tail wheel design and say, you know what, I like the Curtiss or I like other tricycle gear designs, and figure out a way to re-engineer it and move the wheels into a completely different place. Whereas on the other hand, these birds, they got their wings, arms to wings. You can't start swapping place and say, well, you know what, I'd really like to have the wings over here instead. Well, this is an evolutionary constraint that we're gonna talk about a little bit more. So right now I'd like to talk about convergent evolution, and essentially there's four main lineages of flying organisms that came about flight completely independently. At first glance, it might seem that they were really that they came from the same design, or from the same, they evolved from each other, which is completely not true. They actually evolved from other four-legged animals, except for the insects. The birds, the bats, and the pterosaurs, they all evolved from four-legged animals that had their arms adapted to wings. And later we'll talk a little bit about why it seems they're so similar that they all have armed wings. Well, why don't they have it a different way? Why don't they have wings coming out of their back, like we might like to see? The insects are the most ancient line of flying creatures, and the way they came about flight is still quite unknown. They also fly in a somewhat different manner. They do flap their wings. They do similar aerodynamic effects. However, the way the wings function is quite different. The membranes that line the wings are mostly dead surface, and the way that they set it up into an airfoil shape, and the way that it's applied is actually, you might be able to see this, all these bridges and lines. They have these veins that run through these clear coated wings, and they're set up in such a way that when they flap them up and down, the air bends them into the appropriate shape. So the way that the veins run, it makes it weaker and stronger structures throughout. So this, for an engineer, this has got to be absolutely incredible how you can design a rigid, semi-flexible structure that when it moves, it sets up its own aerodynamic structures to be able to fly. This is just quite astounding, and very much can be learned from that. And there's still a lot of research being done about how exactly insect flight came about. Right now, I'd like to talk a little bit about how these animals fly and the way that they, the exact methods that they're using to fly. So, look at some videos of them flying in slow motion. This is a bat flying in slow motion. So you'll be able to see how the wings flex and the different structures involved. With the bat, it's very clear that the wings are, in fact, arms, because they still have the claws hanging off the arms, they still have the fingers, so it's very apparent. So bats use a flapping motion, but they're also bringing their wings forward and back. The way they manipulate the wing skins is, of course, different from the insects. It's very interesting because they have those 4 or 5 fingers that extend throughout the membrane, so they have very fine control. They can bring their fingers together to change the shape of the wings. They can bring them out. So they do have some pretty fine control of the wing surface. However, we're going to soon see that why birds end up being far more prominent than bats. One of the big constraints of bats is that they can only fly at night. I don't think anyone's ever seen bats flying in daytime. There's only a little bit, there'll be exceptions, but they're not common in daytime. And this is where all the stories of vampires and, being about night, and that if they don't go back into their cave by nighttime, they'll just fall apart, disintegrate. Well, it's kind of true, because the bat wings are so thin that the sun burn them right through their skin. They don't have enough thickness to be able to protect themselves, so the sun will just burn their skin and they'll dry out, and it'll kill the cells. So it can't really fly in the open daytime. So this puts a major constraint on their ability to evolve and compete with other creatures. Look at some insects. Here's a dragonfly. This is considered a more primitive insect form where they have 4 wings. The insects that we'll later see with 2 wings actually evolved from the 4.
Kind of like a biplane.
Kind of like a biplane, but not quite. You see, they beat their wings asymmetrically. They actually have independent control. They can beat them in sync or out of sync. So it's part of the way they fly. It gives them very fine control. They can fly forward and backwards and be very maneuverable, kind of like a helicopter. So sometimes you can see their wings being in a figure-8 motion. Very long time ago, back in the Jurassic, when they had the giant one, Jurassic. When did the giant dragonflies?
Right before that, Devonian.
And then the Devonian, they had
Pennsylvania.
They had ginormous dragonflies. I mean, these things
300 million years.
They were 300 million years ago. Yeah, they were about
a yard.
Yeah, they were just enormous, and based on modern understanding of insects, the physical constraints are just phenomenal. We can't really even imagine how they could hold themselves together, and I think that's still, there's a lot to be learned. We are very used to seeing the animals and creatures that are around us, similar to the aircraft. We're used to analyzing what we see, but when we come across fossils and evidence of other life forms, oftentimes it's very difficult for us to explain how they were able to be so big, because it's not something we're used to seeing. Bees, flies, and other insects actually derived from other insects more like the dragonflies. They lost their back set of wings, the 3rd and 4th wing. They have little stabilizers. They have these little hairs in place of vestigial hind wings. They use those almost like the gyroscopic instruments on aircraft. They use them for being able to sense direction and motion and stay upright. So they just flick around in the back and they use the sensory organs. Meanwhile, their main wings, they beat them more rapidly. However, by going from 4 to 2 wings, they became more efficient. They were able to use less muscles and put more focus on the main wings. So they haven't entirely squeezed out the dragonflies and the other 4-winged insects, but they have become quite prominent throughout the world. There's a very slow motion of how B gets ready to fly.
Kind of reminds me of that scene in Toy Story where Buzz Lightyear is getting ready to try and fly out of Sid's house. And climbs up onto the banister.
Yeah, we're getting there. Here we go. Puts his wings out. He starts beating them. It's going to start beating them before he even starts flying. This is very interesting because you can see the flex and the motion. You see that when they're coming up, they're bent one way. When they're coming down, they're bent the other way. That's from the air resistance and the way the vanes are set up. That the entire control of the wing is evolved, and then they don't actually control that motion. It's just controlled by the shape and the airflow. So they're going to beat their wings first to warm up because they actually have to warm up their muscles before they're able to fly. And then once they get airborne, very interesting. You can see the way that they're like paddles that bend and flex into the exact shape as they're beating their wings to fly. Now I'm going to show a little bit more about how birds fly since I have my helpers here. So we'll see if they want to do a little bit of a demonstration here. Kili! Show us your wings. So I'd like to show you a little bit about the avian wings. See, they're just like arms, the joint sites I showed you in the picture, and you can see by the way they flex when I open and close them. I'm holding him by the fingers, meanwhile his arm bones are further inside. And then they're lined with feathers. So I'll be talking a little bit about that more later, but let's see if we can fly.
Question. Maybe this sounds like kind of a stupid question, but you know how you can get wings in some restaurants? Does the wings that you get actually come from the wings of the bird?
Yes.
Yeah, and to break it to you, those buffalo wings, they're not actually made from buffalo or bison.
No, I meant chicken wings.
Yeah, yep, they're right from the wings. And we'll look at some more of the wing structure later, and you'll get to see about the little bits that you're devouring. So you might have missed that. They flap their wings very fast. Their heart beats very fast as well. So they're in order to keep that flight going, they have to do a lot of motion that's very difficult for us to detect. So I have a slow motion video of these two flying. birds, quite often they'll take a dump right before they're ready to go. It's brilliant, isn't it? You take the weight off, and less weight means you need less lift to fly, and you get some rocket propulsion while you're at it. I'll talk a little bit more about the actual flight stroke that birds use, but the principles of flight are still the same: lift, drag, weight, and thrust. So the method that they are able to accomplish it may be slightly different, but the wing structure itself still achieves lift by the extension. So even though they're flapping, if a bird's going to fly in gliding flight, they still have that wing surface area that's sufficient to glide. We may know about some soaring birds that can fly entirely without flapping and just soaring on air currents. Meanwhile, the powered birds, they usually have shorter wings that are more maneuverable, but they're able to use them. So they'll flap and they'll glide between flaps, because you can't flap continuously. Unlike a propeller, which continuously produces thrust, the flap produces thrust in waves. So between that, they're just gliding on the wing. It's kind of almost analogous to swimming, where maybe you're swimming the butterfly, the breaststroke, kind of sinking a little bit between strokes, but then you push yourself and glide between them. So it may seem from these images that they came about flight from the same ancestor by the same method, because hey, they all have them on, except for the insects. We're not really going to talk too much about them. They're a little bit more distinct. But between the birds, the pterosaurs, and the bats, it may seem that they came about flight from the same ancestry, the same design, the same method. But they do have quite important differences. And I think on my next slide I'll be able to, I'll be able to show you some of those differences. Your pterosaur, which is an ancient flying reptile from about 300 to 50 million years ago till
About 200 to 60 million.
200 till about 65 million years ago. They dominated the skies. They probably evolved from reptiles. Their arm isn't all that big. Their arm ends right here. These are their fingers. So their arm is hardly enough wing area to be able to sustain flight. However, they have this evolved, very, very, very elongated wing bone that's almost like a wing spar on an airplane wing. It also forms the leading edge surface, so it creates that airflow, the rounded airflow from the front edge. So this is actually their pinky bone. You see, their other fingers are ahead, so their wing, you can picture it. This is the wing, like this, and then that pinky bone is extended to probably 4 times the length of the entire arm. Now, can you imagine hanging by your pinkies? Not really, but this bone is so thick and it tapers out towards the end that it's actually strong enough that to them it's not a pinky, to them it's their wing bone. It's homologous, and it's evolved from the pinky to be able to create this very, very long, high aspect ratio flight structure. Can anyone define high aspect ratio? Does anyone else remember anything? Chord line?
When you have a high aspect ratio, it's supposed to be flight is more stable, but you are less maneuverable, I believe.
That's a byproduct of high aspect ratio. It may not be the purpose, though.
Yeah, he asked what it was.
The wing length is a lot longer than it is wide.
And what's the purpose of this? What's the advantage? Well, why would you seek out a high aspect ratio like this pterosaur has versus the bat?
Gaining more lift, because more air can flow over the wing.
Well, it's not necessarily any more lift, because here you have a longer cord. So the longer cord may produce a similar amount of lift. There's a slightly different reason. It's close.
Instead of for gliding and long distance flights?
Yes. Why?
Because you use less energy and less movement.
Right. So we're all getting to the point that with the high aspect ratio, you have less drag. So the greater corded wings, they produce more drag because there's more air resistance from the extended cord line. So by having a narrower chord but a longer wing, you can have more leading edge surface, and yet without creating the extra drag of having a deeper wing. So that makes it very good for gliding flight, because there's less drag and still a sufficient amount of lift produced. Hey.
If I need.
Well, now we're going to talk about that first step of becoming airborne, from going from a terrestrial animal of some sort, that guinea pig that sprouts wings, and how you go from not flighted to completely flighted. Something in between may not seem very useful. You kind of think, a dinosaur with its stubby little arms, those T-Rex, it's not very long of an arm, so even if you stick feathers on those, you can't exactly fly. You can't get that large butt up in the air. So we're gonna look at some of the issues of becoming airborne. And this isn't quite there. This may seem silly if you don't think it through, but a little bit more of an understanding, I think we'll figure out and get on to how you do get airborne. Okay. So, if you look at the skeletal structures of theropod dinosaurs, and here you have modern birds, and this is something in between. Is that Archaeopteryx?
Looks it, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, this isn't T-Rex size. This is bigger than it would really be. We're talking about the size of a chicken, so what you see here is probably about this big. So it's scaled up so you can see it. So we're not talking about getting T-Rex to fly here. We're talking about getting this, pint-sized, maybe slightly bigger than a rabbit, very slender, fast-running, carnivorous dinosaur into the air. He's got the arms, and not quite there yet, but we start by just looking at the homologous bone structures. We'll see that they are quite similar. The birds, they have that very long neck. This long neck is an advantage to the dinosaurs, because they need to be able to manipulate their prey and be able to kill their prey easily. Birds need that flexible neck to preen themselves and take care. So you can see my bird can turn her head around almost over 180 degrees. She has no problem with that. That's because there's more vertebrae than in your human neck. So human, 90 degrees is about all you can do. Birds can turn their neck much further, and when they're preening, Kili can get her head all the way back and preen her tail feathers. So you can imagine the neck's very flexible. So that's a byproduct of evolving from theropod dinosaurs. The wings, yes, the dinosaurs run around and droop down, but when the bird's flying, they're going to be raised. But they are similar to the arms. The legs, you got your scaly legs on birds. This is about as close as you can imagine to seeing a dinosaur. These legs like this. Little dinosaur, it probably looks something like that. Scaly, meaty legs. One thing that's very different on the parrots than other birds, though, that they're not quite representative of bird feet, is birds, the parrots, they have zygodactyl feet. This toe spun around. So on most birds, they have 3 toes forward like this and 1 toe back. Parrots actually evolved to swing this toe around to the back like this, and that helps them be able to climb up and down trees more easily for their diet. But we know that it evolved from the forward-facing 3 toes because we can still bend it into that shape. It just simply evolved an adaptation to be able to swing back as well. Hey. So, what advantages what similarities did pterosaur dinosaurs have before there were even birds to work into that direction? They already had hollow bones, most likely. They're running around chasing small prey, possibly insects. So the lighter the structure, the quicker they can move. Also, biologically, there's less burden on it, less musculature is necessary to propel themselves forward. They were already bipedal, running around 2 feet. These birds, you can see quite similarly, they walk around on 2 feet. They were possibly already warm-blooded. That warm-bloodedness may have already existed in them. And quite possibly, and we'll talk about this a little more later, they quite likely they even had feathers on these dinosaurs. They also had very efficient respiratory systems because they're running around a lot at high speeds. In order to be able to keep up their bloodstream, they already had developed air sacs. So there's been evidence of air sacs similar to the ones that birds have in dinosaurs. Their respiratory system is a little different than ours. We have lungs, we breathe in, and then we breathe out. Birds have a circular system where they breathe in, it goes through their air sacs, and then it ends up in their lungs, and then it breathes out. So it goes in a circular motion. So they're constantly pulling oxygen from the air rather than the way we do. We take a breath in, we get the oxygen, and we take a breath out. While we're breathing out, we're not getting any more oxygen. Whereas the birds, because it's a circular type of breathing, they're always getting that oxygen in. This becomes quite important for when they become airborne and fly, because they're constantly flapping those wings at a very high rate, so they need to be able to metabolize their food very quickly to build the energy to power their muscles. Now, I have something here that's going to make Donald very jealous. This is a cast of Archaeopteryx lithographica. And now the reason Donald's going to get very jealous is because I was in an auction where he bought one of these. He bought a crappy, uncolored, chipped up version that was bent and distorted. I think you paid more than that. $1.90. So and he got into this vicious bidding war. The thing wasn't worth that much. So I got this one for like the same or less than he paid for his, and yet this was a much better specimen. Now this is a cast. This isn't the original.
The original would be about $10 million easily.
But the cast is very representative, very similar. And the reason this is such an interesting creature that was discovered back in the 1800s is that it has features of both birds and dinosaurs that are visible in the same creature. What would be a beak on most birds, actually there's teeth. And if you come up later, I can show you. You can look very closely and you can see the teeth marks. And you can even touch it, you can even feel the teeth marks on there. They have claws on the arms. Now birds, they have wings, they don't have claws on the arms. See, there's no claws there. The fingers, they become part of the wing. They're not visible. Well, in the earlier flying birds or late unflying dinosaurs, they still had the claws on the arms, which are obviously vestiges of that prior arm use that they had. They have bony tail. Birds, they do have a tail, they do have feathers, but it's all flexible, it's all feathers that stick out. The tail isn't extended. But on the Archaeopteryx, the tail actually has feathers coming off it throughout the entire length of it. And the skeleton structure looks very much the way that dinosaurs appear, but also similar to birds. So this is something that has features of both. But now the most important feature, and what makes this a flying creature, and more similar to a bird than just any dinosaur, they are actually able to discover feathers. There's feather impressions in the sediment that were discovered, and the specimen probably isn't good enough, but from the original specimen, they were able to validate these are asymmetric feathers. I'll talk about that a little bit more about the exact feather structures, but these are very, very, very similar to the feathers that birds have. So from the evidence, it's quite apparent that this was able to fly at least to some extent, possibly and most likely not as well as modern birds. They were able to discover the sternum isn't as sturdy as on modern birds, so they most likely didn't have the strong kind of flight muscles that you might see on a duck or a Canadian goose, and some of the other long migratory birds. Chinese love to eat them, and they might be popular around some other places. It's a lot of meat in that breast. So when you're eating a chicken breast, that's their flight muscle. That's the meatiest part, because that's the biggest motion they have to be able to do is flap those muscles to be able to hold themselves.
Oh, stay there. I'm sorry, I have to do this. How does the bottom blah blah blah? I got to take pictures. I'm sorry. This is not what I want. Every bottom wants to. Sorry, I may hate this. So yeah, I'll put you with the Archaeopteryx. You look at them, don't look at me.
Oh, then you made such a big deal about it.
Well, yeah. I'd asked to take pictures of you, but then I got to get permission, and I don't know if you want pictures of you. Oh, it's
but then you can sue them for royalties. Could you for royalty?
Shut up, please. No. Not if unless I take it, and I don't get your.
I think the magic part.
Yeah, every single man.
They don't post those in the teacher locker room.
Well, this is, they have said this would be for the Poly website or something website. And I said, well, can I take pictures of the students? He said, yeah, they asked me if they want to have pictures. I take pictures of you. Anybody have a problem with this? You don't want to be seen by the... Uh-oh, bird fly. Oh, they're going to poop on that.
Oh.
I don't think when you get a chance to say anything, you just actually, it doesn't have to be right now. Actually, don't actually might use the mic
So is there any reason why you don't like football?
Yeah, well, it's mostly a joke. I mean, I trained the bird to do that. It's not animal abuse. He knows this. He's normally reinforced for doing this. The way it actually started was, I didn't come up with it, he did. I'd be sitting and working on my computer and he flies over and starts bugging me. I'm like, no, I need to work. I take him and just like chuck him away so I could go back to work. And he'll turn around and fly back to me. Like, come on, get out of here. I chuck him again. And he turns around and goes back. So he just really wanted to be in whatever I was doing. So it ended up becoming a trick where if I throw him, he does a spinning flight and comes back to me. If I just tell him to fly, then he goes to wherever he's supposed to go, or he goes to his branch. So if I throw him, that's our cue for a circular flight. So that's the behavior that we developed.
Okay. Does Kili ever win an argument? Does Kili ever win an argument with Truman?
Oh, fight?
Yeah.
Oh, always. No, she terrorizes him. He doesn't really start.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's more aggressive. She's like.
Even though she's so small, she eats just like men and women, right?
it's not just, it's just a more aggressive species.
Oh, okay.
If anyone wasn't clear, they're not related. They're not the same species. They're the same genus. That's why they have a lot of similarities. Where they got the green and the dark head, and they do look quite similar. That's just because of a genus relationship, not species. They are different species. So it's not that he's bigger because he's a boy and she's a girl. They are actually, regardless, you know, she could have been male, he could have been female. They'd be similar size. That's just coincidence. He happens to be bigger and male.
She pushes him around.
Yeah. In here, I have to have a divider for them, otherwise she'd pulverize him. It's not pretty.
By the way, Mike, just a quick question. Are we becoming airborne, or he's got an alternate use for feathers? Okay.
Yep.
That's
me next.
What?
Yeah, it's going to start right now.
Okay.
So, who here can think of some alternate uses for feathers besides for flight?
Quills and old school pens.
Okay, let me rephrase that. It's a good try. Listen, from a design point of view, that's a great. That's a human-centric bias that makes it difficult for us to understand our world. We have to sometimes put that aside and think beyond that. That's a good point actually, because we do have that human-centric bias, and it's not a bad thing to bring that up. So there's 10 points for you. It's not a C as in a bad grade. It's just A's a little bit more credit, but it's a good try. Can someone else think of how feathers can be beneficial to an organism that has them? That other than flight, okay, the birds use them to fly, but what else could birds or other creatures possibly use them for? Green shirt, please.
Camouflage.
Okay, that's an option. Yes, they do have the color on them, so they can use them for camouflage. What else?
Shelter?
Sorry?
Shelter?
Shelter. Yes, they cover the skin. They protect the skin. This is actually a benefit to swimming birds like ducks. They put oils on their feathers so their skin doesn't get wet and they can swim and not get too cold. The skin gets wet, they're going to lose heat. So by using the feathers to protect themselves, they can maintain heat. Anyone else have any other ideas?
Good for thermal heat protection.
Right. And we're going to look at down feathers, which are specifically used for heat protection. These are warm-blooded animals, yet they live in all sorts of temperatures. And when we say thermal, it's not just for heat protection, it's also for some desert birds, they use the feathers to keep themselves shaded and cool rather than losing heat. So it works both ways. You can either use it to keep the heat out or keep the heat in, but it creates a thermal barrier between the bird and the outside environment.
There's also the aspect of sexual selection, like with the peacock, that numbers the opposite sex and the sexes, so they get one more feathers.
Yes, very good. Have an egg. So we can look at alternative uses. This right here is the cock. This here is a cockatoo. It uses its crest feathers. It lifts its crest feathers as an excitement display. It'll also be a mating display, but it's mainly demonstrates excitement. And in fact, my birds will do this too. They just don't have feathers long enough to do this. Let me trim him right now. If you notice him, his feathers just started to lift up like that. You see how he got all fluffy like this. If his feathers were any longer, that's what it would look like. So this is an extended feather that was developed to show that excitement. They use that to communicate to other birds. Excitement could be good, it could be bad. It could be, I'm mad at you, stay away, or it could be, I'm happy, let's get it on, baby. So they're demonstrating excitement, but the context is what demonstrates if it's a good excitement or a bad excitement. But when they do get excited in some way, whether it's agitation or in a happy way, they will raise their crest. It can also be used as a warning sign. This isn't feathers, this is a lizard, but it makes itself look big. This is a warning that you don't want to mess with me. I'm big and strong. So that's another way that feathers could possibly be used in ways prior to any kind of flight adaptation. And then here's an artist's rendition of possibly a feathered dinosaur, where they have just these stubby feathers. It's almost like fur. So you have these dinosaurs that never developed fur. They were scaly. They were cold-blooded. And possibly as the climates began changing, they needed to be able to stay cool or stay warm. They may have developed feathers to maintain heat. Another one that no one... yes?
Incubating eggs.
It's exactly what I'm about to get to. Yep. And one more is for incubating eggs. This may be a demonstration. This may be flighted, but you can imagine where eggs, they need to be kept at a very certain temperature. They need to be kept at 97, 98 degrees Fahrenheit, about 34 Celsius body temperature. If they get too hot, the proteins will denature up, and if they get too cold, it will cease to live. So if you happen to live in a climate where the temperature is perfect, or if you're a turtle and you bury the eggs at a depth where the temperature maintains stasis, you won't have any problem. The eggs will get the amount of heat they need to metabolize their energy, and hatchlings will hatch. However, once the climate starts changing and you get either too hot or too cold, you may need some kind of way of protecting the temperature of those eggs. So quite possibly before even birds come around, birds obviously they nest and they sit on their eggs. It's postulated that dinosaurs developed feathers, elongated feathers on their arms to incubate their eggs. So what they would do is they would sit in a squatting position and they put their arms behind them like this and make a kind of a tent. They make a tent using their arms behind them to keep those eggs either warm or cool as the environment would have dictated. They've actually found a fossil of a dinosaur in exactly this position, and it's the original that Thomas looked at?
It's a copy of Museum Access Oviraptor sitting on a nest.
Yes, they have an Oviraptor display at the Museum of Natural History where they show a Oviraptor sitting in this position. It's actually right in that position, so they know that they were doing this during incubation. And then likewise, birds, they'll use their feathers also as a way of incubating their eggs. What they'll do is actually they'll pluck their breast and expose a skin patch on their belly, so when the mother bird and the father bird, many species will take turns, when they sit on the eggs, they'll expose the skin so that they can transfer heat from their belly to the egg directly. Just as an interesting side note, birds maintain a fever-like temperature all the time. They live at what for us would be a fever when we are sick. That's what they're doing all the time. So this provides the greater energy that they need for flight. It also creates better bacterial resistance where bacteria tend to die. We have a fever when we want to kill off bacteria. So they generally tend to be more healthy. And when they're incubating eggs, it's perfect because the egg needs to be at at our body temperature. It's a more primitive form. The embryo is kind of a backward state. So while the embryo needs to be at a maintained temperature of 98 degrees, the bird maintains about 104. So the heat loss between the metabolism of the bird, the skin patch, the air, the eggshell, by the time it reaches the embryo is maintained at a perfect 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm just going to go over the uses of feathers, and we mentioned them, but I just want to cover them one more time in case you didn't hear them. Birds or bird ancestors could have used feathers for display, whether it to be threatening or to be courting. They use them for protection. You might have seen them scuffle a little bit. They might bite at each other. Most likely they'll end up biting a feather rather than biting the skin. It's not good armor, but it provides some protection. There are feathers used for sensory, for sense. You're not going to be able to see it from there, but if anyone's interested in taking a look, they have little hairs on around their nostrils. These aren't actually hair; they are feathers. They're a different kind of feather that is used for sense, and they may be using these to sense the speed that they're moving. So kind of like the hairs that we have in our ears to be able to hear, the hairs pick up the pulsations. They're using the feathers to sense changes in their motion. Of course, they use them for insulation, incubation. They'll use them for balance and stability. So you can imagine a dinosaur that maybe has these feathery arms, but they're not wings yet. They're just used for incubating. When the thing's running around, maybe it takes a big jump and it loses its balance. Stick those wings out. Think of a tightrope rope walker with that long pole. It gets more moment from the arms, but it also gets a little bit of aerodynamic balance. And so you use feathers for that. For swimming, I talked about ducks, where they'll use them to keep the water from touching their skin. This keeps them warm. This is how you can see those Canadian geese swimming in like a frozen pond. You'll see the ice and then you'll see the goose swimming there. You're like, how the hell is that thing not freezing its butt off in that freezing water? Well, it's got the feathers. So not only do they have a metabolism that's built for that, they have the feathers that are keeping the water out, so they're able to maintain a warmer temperature. And so also I'd like to talk about some of the advantages of feathers over possibly fur or other structures that might have been used in place of feathers for some of these things. Feathers are very lightweight, yet they're very strong. They may be one of the strongest body organic structures that there are. The quill of a feather, it's round, but yet very flexible. As it gets out to the outer tip, it thins out, so there's no waste of material. You see the quill is thick at the edge. This is inside the bird. It gets thinner as you get to the edge. The barbs and follicles are hair thin, and yet they overlap. They interconnect with each other. It's kind of like Velcro, where when the bird frees itself, when it runs these feathers between its beak, it reconnects them. So if they get torn, they get separated like this. See, there's a bit of a tear there. They run through the beak like that, like Velcro. It sticks back together, so it returns to the original structure. So with the interconnecting barbs, you can actually have a flat surface. So this is an aerodynamic flat surface, and yet it's just hairs. It's just hairs that are interconnected, so it's like a sheet of paper almost. The overlaying fibers can be used to form surfaces. So if you can imagine multiple feathers, one after another. These are slightly different, but you get one feather, then another feather. By doing that, eventually you get to an entire flight surface. So by having overlay feathers, you get a continuous surface. The feathers also, they have many fibers on them, so they're good at trapping air for insulation. This right here, this is a down feather. It's just a poofy white feather. You might have seen these coming out of your jacket or your pillow. So you can see it like that, but it's just a poofy plume like that. This is very, very warm, and as you know from down jackets, they're very good at trapping heat. That's because it traps air between the different fibers. And later, feel free to come up and take a closer look. Each strand has little strands coming out of that. So it's kind of this random structure, but that traps air very well. So this keeps the bird warm. Now, you won't see it, but these birds, they all have them underneath their main feathers. Once again, if you come up, look a little closer, you'll see the white stuff underneath his feathers, underneath his colorful feathers, and that's down. That's what they're using for insulation. They can manipulate the feathers from the skin, since the shafts are embedded in the skin itself. They're able to, kind of like a cat, put the hair up, put it down. So with the feathers, they're able to raise or lower the feathers. This is good for flight, but this is also very good for heat protection. You have night and day. At night it's cold, in the daytime it's warm. So at night they can poof out their down. The down can trap air. Meanwhile, they take their outer feathers, their contour feathers. These are the ones that are more visible. They keep those down flat. So that's they're keeping the heat in by closing themselves off. On the other hand, in the daytime, if it gets hot, and they're standing in sunlight or it's just a hot day and they need to cool off, they can raise the feathers and let the air out. So by not trapping air, they can radiate heat off of their body to the cooling. As I previously mentioned, the feathers are repairable by preening, but also they're replaceable. So if a bird gets an entirely damaged feather, they molt about every 6 months to a year, or if the feather's pulled out entirely, it'll regrow. So this is very good because over the span of its life, these feathers may get damaged, they may get into a fight, but the fact is they'll so it's more repairable. In fact, in a way, it's more repairable in skin. When we looked at the pterosaur earlier, pterosaur gets its skin ripped in a fight. That may not let it fly anymore because the air will pass through its wings. So if the wing skin got ripped in a main location, it wouldn't be able to fly anymore until it's healed, and without flight, it may not be able to survive. Whereas with birds, since the feathers are all individual, you can break certain feathers and the other ones are unharmed, or they can be preened back together, put back together to form a flight surface over again. I'd like to talk about the evolution of feathers themselves, and this is actually very interesting because these birds right here and all the birds you see out in the wild are living demonstrations of evolution in action, because you have five main kinds of feathers, and these birds, they all embody these 5 types. So they go from the most primitive to the most advanced type of feather. But they don't shed, they don't lose the older feathers. So we're still able to see what the more primitive forms of feathers might be like, and kind of take a glimpse into the past of these unchanged feathers, and kind of imagine how they may have been used by older generations of their ancestors. So the 5 types of feathers, starting from the top down on the white area. So you start from the bristle or the phyllo plume, and that's just like a little shaft. It's almost like a hair. These bristles are mainly used for sensory. They also, given enough of them, they might provide some of the heat protection like hair might. So they have a relatively limited use. Stage 2 are the down feathers, and these are the ones that are primarily used for insulation and keeping warm. That's that random structure. So what happened from an evolutionary stance is you have a single shaft that kind of split up into different hairs. So you just have a deformed stage 1. You get something that's sloppy like this, but it turns out that this traps heat better than that. So this becomes a advantage. So if you think of newborn chicks, like chicken chicks, if you've ever seen them, they're yellow and poofy. They don't have their contour feathers yet. They're born with their down. So they're born with enough feathers to keep themselves warm, but yet they don't have the other feathers developed yet. They're still going to have to eat and grow until they grow into their bigger feathers. So the down feathers are a more primitive form that can be seen on younger birds as they're developing from the embryonic to the natal stage, and they are quite likely to be seen on ancestors of birds which may be considered as dinosaurs. Then the third stage is called the semi-plume, and this is an intermediary between a contour feather and a down feather. It'll be the barbs, still won't come aligned, but there'll be more of them. The shaft will be elongated, so they become kind of an intermediary feather. The birds have some of them. These are kind of will be the less important one, but you'll find some of this on their body where it's just a longer shaft. So it's not quite a plumage feather, it's not quite a down feather, it's an intermediate stage. Keeps them warm, and also gives them some color. More importantly, though, is the fourth stage is the contour feather. These feathers are the ones you see all throughout the body. So without looking at their wings, when you look at all the body feathers on the birds, these are symmetrical contour feathers. These give them shape, these give them protection from the elements, and these give them the color. So the down feathers, they're all white, but the contour feathers, they'll have color to them. Should I turn on the light?
Yeah, I think it's getting dark in here. Turn on just one.
Yeah, is that a good way to move?
That's better.
Probably solid colored parts versus the non-solid.
On here? It's a transparent image. They're just trying to, it's just a drawing. It's not that critical. So let's see if I have an example. Here we go. This is an example of a. Actually, this is based on a contour feather, but this is a cobra. This is a wing feather, but it's also can be considered a contour feather. You'll notice that the shaft runs through the middle, so it's symmetric. So it's like a down feather, but it became more organized. While that down feather is all random in different directions, there's an evolution that instead of having bits come out in all directions, they come out only in symmetry in left and right. So it gives them a specific shape and surface like this. Now what's very interesting and how you can understand that this is still evolved from down feather. This isn't just a new kind of feather that just came around out of nowhere. It's actually evolved from down. You can see little bits of down, the little white stuff hanging off of it. That's because it's a down feather that's modified into a contour feather. So you evolve a down feather that just develops a little bit more shaft going away from it. So that third stage has more shaft. And then when you get to the fourth stage, it has a long shaft with the barbs coming off of it in a symmetrical form. So now you get into a surface contoured feather. This can be good for that incubating dinosaur we talked about. Puts its arms out, makes a tent behind itself to incubate its eggs. This could be good for a swimming animal, penguin, for instance. This keeps the water off of its body. Yet it keeps it streamlined as well. You don't want to be a raptor or an oviraptor running around with inconsistent feathers that are getting in your way. So you want those feathers to be able to incubate the eggs, but yet you don't want them to be in the way. So they had to be streamlined enough that when they run around, they're not making excess drag and making it difficult for themselves to run around. And then finally, we get to the asymmetrical feathers, and these are the flight feathers. These are the ones that are quite unique to birds. This is what makes a bird able to fly. If you look at a flight feather in this shape, and they're the ones that come out on the tips of the bird's wings. So Ivan Truman's wings, these are the ones on the end like this. So they So when we look at his wings, these feathers are coming out like this. So these feathers, they're not, contrary to the other feathers, they're actually pointing out to the side. They're not pointing back. They're pointing out to the side. So this is like a wing. It's a mini wing. You have your wing spar coming about 1/3 or 1/4 of the way from the leading edge. You have a leading edge formed by some forward feathers, and then you have a trailing, elongated trailing edge. So this is a very simple primitive wing. It even has some twist to it for the specific structure. The way they're believed to evolve from the symmetric feathers is all you got to do to go from this to this is, well, stunt the growth on one side. So one side doesn't grow to the extent the other side grows, and then you become asymmetrical. So it's not a shaft that got moved from the middle to the side. The shaft didn't get moved. It's just you stop growing as much on one side than the other, and then you develop asymmetry. Still, we see a little bit of down, vestigial down on the tip of the feather. This keeps the skin warm and gives it its flight function. Now, if I drop the feather, you'll see it does have an aerodynamic property. It's aerodynamically balanced where it ends up fluttering down like a little helicopter. High enough. That's the aerodynamic property. So the center of gravity is lowered by the shape of the quill. So when it's by itself, it'll get into the spinning motion and flutter down like that. When you put it symmetrically on a bird on each side, now you have wings and flight structures. Not only that, it makes the wings a lot longer. So just the arm parts themselves, the arms and fingers, they end here. So his wing is maybe only about 6 inches, maybe 6 to 8 inches long, the arm part. But you can almost double that length without adding much weight. So it's unlike the pterosaur that had to add that long arm bone to have a longer wing, here we have a elongated wing where it's longer than the arm's ending here, yet we're adding another 6 or 8 inches to that, so we're almost doubling the size of the wing with a very lightweight but yet very durable and already aerodynamic structure. So this is crucial to the ability of birds to fly over their dinosaur ancestors. And then over here is just some other forms, some more specific forms. Some birds will evolve even more sophisticated, specialized feathers like that peacock analogy. So you do get more forms. The 5 main forms can be found on all birds. So unlike that first picture that I showed you, this one might illustrate some stages that you would go from a theropod dinosaur to a bird. And this is an artist's rendition. This isn't exactly literal, but it's just to help you visualize an idea of how you go from not being able to fly. You're a 2-footed, 2-armed dinosaur running around chasing dragonflies. Notice someone has to be flying first. Yet the dragonflies, their ancestors didn't have to fly. They developed flight to get to the plants, while the theropods developed flight to get to the insects. So now they develop some feathers for insulation. They might develop some arm feathers for incubation. Once again, these are not flight structures. They're not moving toward a goal of flight. They don't have a goal of flight. They're not trying to fly. They're just trying to do what they do better. That is surviving in a possibly cooling environment. They're trying to protect their eggs from the cooling environment. So they're just trying to survive. They're not trying to fly by any means. And then these feathers become longer. They get more plumage. It might be favorable to selection and courting. So as you're getting to these stages, it just so happens to be that this, rather than the other creatures, is close to flight. It happens to have some of the stuff that, if it could be a little different, it could fly. And once again, it doesn't have a goal of becoming flighted. This is not designed. You're not going from not flight to flight. You're going from not insulated to insulated, from non-incubating to incubating, and then just so happens that the thing can jump maybe and get a little bit of glide with these symmetrical feathers that are normally used for incubation. Then evolution really kicks off. And once these creatures evolve the most basic primitive form of flight, it might just be a jump, and just to stay airborne for a second longer than it would jumping with strictly its legs. These wings just keep it up long enough that it gets that insect in its mouth versus the other ones. That will have an evolutionary advantage and will bias evolution. Therefore, by natural selection, they will survive better. And the ones that can do these jumping glides better will evolve further and further. And then eventually, some of the feathers evolve from symmetric to asymmetric. And now they're able to glide and fly. And then from here, it's just a step of fine-tuning to get to a bird. So I think this illustrates the concept. We're really trying to talk about this and get this conceptually, but the drawing helps you visualize these different stages and these different purposes, and helps you realize that evolution is not a deterministic element, whereas it's actually just the causal. Whatever you have along the way, that's what you use, and you find ways, and then there are ways that becomes improved by natural selection and survival, and that's what we end up seeing. So we're seeing the result. When we look at a bird, it's hard to imagine these previous stages. Just from looking at a bird, you don't get the previous stages. You just see something that flies. You assume that it had to always fly. It's hard to imagine these other stages. But now with fossil evidence, DNA evidence, and all the research that's being done, we're actually able to find specimens like this Archaeopteryx and Microraptor, Oviraptor, that have these other forms and other uses for these feathers and other uses for these pre-flight structures that actually, it's not like that T-Rex image I showed you before where they just get some feathers on their arms to try to fly, and they can't. You just happen to have something that was possible to fly. You had something that was already lightweight, already hollow bones, already had feathers, already had the incubating feathers. Just because it had this, it just so happened to be by chance that it got to fly. That's how we see the result, and then we were looking back at it through history.
In other words, say it was a lizard which was chasing the dragonfly, didn't catch it, the lizard may have evolved to depend more heavily on beetles or things on the ground. So it just so happens the ones that are going to fly are those who have already had adaptations that could be lent to that, even though they didn't necessarily evolve to that. But I think we did a good job on that, Mike.
I'm done.
I know, it was good. That's important, you got it right. No offense. Yeah, you are taking your time, Michael. Watch your clock.
Is that bad?
I don't know. We'll give you the whole class, I guess, sir. What time? Like an hour and a half left?
Yeah, that'll be fun. I mean, I'll leave some time for you to write the students about the nuclear afterwards.
You don't have to. So that was just.
Okay, yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about convergent design, convergent structures between birds and airplanes. And now this is where we're really going to tie this in. So now we understand how the homology of birds and their previous theropod ancestors developed wings and flight. And now I want to, this is coincidental. This doesn't, I'm not trying to say that airplanes evolved from birds, but I want to look at some of the structures. It just so happened that we designed them in ways that are similar to birds. And why did that happen? Well, just because that's the way it works. That's the way physics works. So when we were looking at those analogous flying creatures like bats and pterosaurs and birds, that they're all flapping with their arms, well, why did all of them arrive to the same method to fly? Is it a common design or is it something else? It comes down to the physics of how flight is possible. So when we come on airplane designs that are good at flying, they happen to be quite similar to birds because that's a design, it's a scheme, it's a layout that's good for flight. So some of the convergent structures we can find. I picked this airplane specifically. I don't know if anyone knows what this is. Anyone venture a guess? Anyone happen to know? This is a Cessna 172 RG Cutlass. So it's like the famous Cessna 172 trainer, but it's a retractable gear version. This thing is ridiculous the way it tucks the gear in. Because it's a high wing design, they started with a high wing. They aren't able to tuck the gear in like on low wing monoplanes. So if you saw the Mooney or the Pipers earlier on, the wing is low, so the gear just tucks up into the wing. Well, here the wing's so high, you can't run the gear from here to the ground. So the gear has to be attached to the body. But in order to be able to make a trainer to get pilots accustomed to retracting the gear, but with the familiarity of a Cessna 172 trainer, they had to find a way to retract the body. So the thing has to, the gear's out like this and has to like come in and then go back and then tuck in. It's some ridiculous structure. It breaks all the time. Not a very popular plane with pilots, but it's cheap, so they get used to it. But if the gear gets stuck when they have, it's not very reliable. It's too complicated of a structure. The low-wing airplanes like the Moonies, the Pipers, the Bonanzas, worst case scenario, they can either gravity drop the gear out of the wings or they can manually pump them down, so they're a little more reliable. So you got retractable landing gear both in airplanes and birds. The birds, they'll tuck their feet in when they're flying to be more dynamic. You don't want to fly with your legs sticking out. Neither does the plane want to fly with its gear sticking out. So by retracting the gear, they become more aerodynamic. They're streamlined. The skins, they overlap. You got paint and wax. You try to get the surface to be as continuous as possible. You don't want to disrupt any airflow, so that leads to drag. You have tapered wingtips. If you look at Truman's wings, they become narrower as you get toward the edges. Similarly, most airplanes will taper their wings. This just happens to be a coincidence, but it kind of makes sense that navigation and command of a airplane or a bird come from the front. It kind of makes sense that you're running it from the front because you're looking forward. That's where you're moving. You know, they had their eyes on their butt. It would be kind of hard to fly that way. Similarly, airplanes, they'll have a windshield and pilots in the front, so they're commanded and they're controlled from the front. Brains in the front of a bird, because that's where the eyes are. It makes perfect sense. So they're both high-wing monoplanes. The birds, they have their wings up on top when they're flying from the body. It would kind of make sense because the wings, they're coming out from the shoulders, yet their rib cage and the body hangs down below that. The high-wing design is more stable. Inherently more stable. The wing is usually somewhere toward the middle. Because the way the center of gravity is, having the wing in the middle means you're pretty balanced out, or it might be slightly forward, but you very rarely find aircraft and no birds or flying creatures at all where the wings are on the back. Birds could never have evolved to flight with wings on their feet. back feet instead of their arms, because that just wouldn't be balanced on the center of gravity. If they developed feathers on their legs and never on their arms, they would have never taken flight. They'd never be able to jump in the air because they flip which way? Forward or back? They flip forward. Yeah, they just tumble. So they would never have evolved a flight structure. So it happens to be that bats, pterosaurs, and birds all use their arms to fly. That's because the center of gravity just so happens to work out from that place. So if you can get skins or feathers on those arms, they can fly. Why do they all use a flapping motion? Talk a little bit more about how they flap exactly, but they all use a flapping motion. That's because the arms, they can bend in those ways. You can't have a propeller on a bird. You can't have circular structure. So that's how these designs end up converging so similarly, because that's the way aviation ends up working. There may be some other ways to do it, but this is one of the most efficient ways and designs to do it. Finally, got your horizontal stabilizer. Birds don't have a vertical stabilizer like airplanes do. They're a little bit more unstable, but they have more minute control since they're a living organism. They can bend their tail and their wings to compensate for the things that a rudder might be used for otherwise. And of course, they both have airfoil wings. It may be difficult to see, but the way the feathers are layered on a bird, the front is thicker, the back is thinned out, so they also have an airfoil, similar, not quite the same, but a similar airfoil to modern aircraft. So yeah, now I want to talk a little bit about powered flight and the differences and similarities between how birds power their flight and how airplanes power their flight. Would any student like to demonstrate how they think that birds fly with your arms? Anyone like to come up here? Would anyone like an A to come up and show what they think a bird does just using their arms? Okay, please demonstrate what you think a bird does to fly.
I pay attention to the videos. First thing, they jump.
Well, I mean, just the motion of flight. What's their flight?
They beat the air down and like they twist their arms to adjust the angle of attacks of the wings, and they do this a lot.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're hitting on it, and I was really looking for a sufferer to demonstrate wrong, to demonstrate what the layperson would think a bird does. Most people, if you look at kids pretending to be birds, or you just try and demonstrate it, people think birds beat their wings just strictly up and down like this, because that's what we see. They're beating them so fast we can't actually see the motion. There's a lot of twisting going on. They'll bring their wings up like this, first tucked in, so that's less drag. You don't want to bring them up and make a drag on the top surface as you bring it up, so they'll bring them up tucked in, they'll stretch them out, they'll power the downstroke, but they'll also turn their primaries and push air back, so they're propelling themselves forward in the air, and they'll bring their feathers back in, they'll tuck them back in, bring them up, and then beat down. So it's actually a very complicated motion that involves multiple dimensions, but just because they happen to evolve from arms, they have the radius and ulna that lets them rotate, they have the pectoral muscles that allow them to move the arm up and down.
So it's really similar to the breaststroke?
It's
Like the butterfly?
more like the butterfly, yeah. It's not completely the same, but it is similar. So they're using the primary feathers on the tip of their wings to propel themselves. So the inner wing feathers are used for maintaining lift. So these aren't producing any thrust. These ones are just keeping them from falling in the air. Whether they're here or here, they still keep maintaining lift to move forward. And then the outer tips, these are the ones that are used. So in gliding flight, these just create an extension of the wing. But in powered flight, when they're beating the wings, they're using these primary feathers to push air downward and back to propel themselves forward. So unlike the airplane that uses a propeller, birds are using both their wings for lift and for thrust. Airplanes use the wings strictly for lift and the propeller for thrust. You can't have a circular motion on a bird. Why don't we use flapping designs on airplanes? Why do we prefer to split them up and use a propeller instead? The propeller produces continuous thrust. The bird strokes are momentary. The propeller is continuous, so it's much more efficient. It's producing thrust throughout the entire cycle of the blades, whereas the bird only produces thrust with every beat. So yeah, propellers, helicopter blades, turbines, all the man-made designs inevitably end up using rotational means for propulsion, whereas the birds, pterosaurs, and bats all end up on feeding motions. That's just the constraints of the designs. But since the flying machines don't have that constraint, they prefer to use the circular propulsion technology. So he's a little bit more flexible. Truman doesn't really like me handling his wings. She loves being handled, so she'll let me pull her wings open and show. So that's why I brought both of them. You can see that the wing is flexible. You got the radius and ulna, so they can be rotated. They can come in and out. And the primary feathers are independently controlled, where the wing can stay extended. The primary feathers can be brought in and out. So there's a lot of flexibility and control with the way they use their muscles to fly. So this is actually very interesting, and I don't think you'll hear about this anywhere else. The birds have similar ways to fly, similar structures to flaps and slats. So can anyone explain how flaps and slats are used on aircraft? What they are, what they do? Donald, have you taught them any of this?
No, they're supposed to know this.
Can anyone explain how flaps and slats are operated?
You want to use flaps when you're usually taking off a landing. It's used to generate lift at lower speeds.
And what about slats? All right, does anyone like to talk about slats here? By the way, put your names on these. If you get any of these bonus points, you put your name on. I'll take that later, and Tom can give you some credit for that. So slats, does anyone guess how slats work? Here's a wing with a slat on it.
How are the slats used to change the center of the pack?
They do change. They do inevitably change the center of lift, the point. But that's not the main thing. Does anyone know the main thing that slats are doing and why you use them, when you use them, and how it's done? No, this looks very poorly on you. I thought you told me
what can I do, Michael? They do it for the test. They probably forgot it already. I mean, they know the flaps for sure, and the slats. It's also in the book, in both books, chapters 2 and 3 of the Aviation and the Gliding book. You know, it's when you're reading. What else do you want me to say?
Come on, someone's going to explain this. I forgot this. How am I going to get by?
Oh, you forgot it.
Just kidding. Well, I'm not that good at explaining how the slats and flaps work. Flaps, they're
Increasing camber and length.
right. You're increasing the surface area of the wing, which allows them to fly at a higher angle of attack. Slats do actually two things. They change the camber, but they also preserve laminar flow with the wing. They refocus the air back on the wing, which prevents from stalling at slower speed. In effect, flaps and slats allow the airplane to fly at slower speed while maintaining lift and avoiding stall. So they can fly at a slower than stall speed. But guess what? Birds actually have a very similar convergent structure. It's called the alula, and it's also known as the bastard wing. This so happens to be their thumb. So while birds lost some of the fingers merged together to form the wings, they still have a little bit of control with their thumb. So it's like they have these little asymmetric feathers, similar to the primary flight feathers that come out of their fingers. They have these on their thumb. So normally they keep them tucked in, but when they're flying and slowing down to land, they can lift and push them a little bit away from their wing surface, so it creates a second wing, so air can move between the wing and the alula, and this keeps the flow, the airflow on the wing, and thus reduces the stall speed, which allows them to get that slow flight, still fly until they hit the perch. I don't think in normal motion you can see it quick enough, but Truman will extend his alula when he's coming into land. So similar. I wouldn't suspect that aviation learned this from birds. I suspect that aviation technology came upon slats independently. But it's just very interesting to look at that birds have a similar structure, similarly evolved concept. That's just because this is the way flight works. This happens to be one of the best ways to do it. And since they had flight feathers on all their fingers, some of them became shorter. But instead of getting rid of them completely, they stayed on as vestigial little wings on their fingers, on their thumb, and it ended up turning out to be a useful thing for landing as a slat. So, talking a little bit about extinction, there's many attempts and trials until you get to the right design. And both in aviation technology and in aviation organisms, a lot of designs just don't work. And it's back to the drawing boards. With engineers, they generally will test a wind tunnel, they'll try different things. They're not going to build the plane and find out it doesn't work, even though that happens. The biplane has certainly been phased out. There was also once a Microraptor canoe. Familiar with this one?
What?
Microraptor canoe, I believe it's called.
Oh, Microraptor Kili.
Gooey.
Yeah, that's the full winger.
Right. So it had wing surfaces, primary flight feathers on its legs as well as on its wings. So they suspect that they flew with them tucked in, creating a second surface similar to a biplane. So it seems that there was some kind of favorability for biplanes in birds and in aviation early on, but yet it eventually got phased out. Well, can someone think of why biplanes or biplane structures in flying organisms might have been beneficial at first and then eventually phased out? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Other than me?
Maybe when they have two wings, you might be thinking that you can generate more lift with two wings instead of one, but the problem is that you're going to have to support the two wings, which is going to add weight and also add variety.
Right, so I guess if you could make a more efficient wing, you wouldn't need to have two wings to create that amount of lift. That's one. There's actually several more. Does anyone know about other benefits of biplanes?
Oh, benefit. There's that why they try biplanes. I believe the wings they need to be so wide to be able to get the same effect as
Sure.
same length as the longer plane.
Sure, but what can be a benefit of that in either case? You think of a benefit, what a reason to do that?
Structural integrity?
Right, because when you make a longer wing, it's got to be stronger to hold all that out. But if you can do two wings separately, there's not as much moment on that structure. Also, maybe in an early organism, the wings weren't evolved to be as long. So by having the other ones on their legs, maybe they can make enough lift. The big thing about biplanes and probably about the biplane flying animals is this is effectively a giant shear web. By having two wings with interconnects between each other, they have the wires between them. They're effectively keeping the structure very strong between the two of them. Each wing keeps the other one from being able to bend, so they can make them thinner, more lightweight, and interconnected. So this was very much done for structure. So the technology was still very simple. They were building them out of wood and cloth. So in order to make them strong enough to fly and produce enough lift, they had to use a biplane structure. Well, as the materials improved and they went to stress skins, they no longer needed to have so much structure. So they end up, and also when you go faster, this makes a lot of drag. It's low flight. This is fine. The extra drag that it makes is mostly induced, so it's providing for slow flight, which is good in an early underpowered aircraft. When you start getting into speed, this becomes inefficient, and as you know, speed is the square of the drag. So, getting more streamlined is more and more important later on. So in the beginning, when there's no one else is flying slow is still better than those who aren't flying. But then when others are flying, now you're competing for speed. So when you're competing for speed, then you start looking at even better ways of doing it. That's why there's barely any biplanes anymore. Also, biplanes have to be more maneuverable because the wings are in tighter.
Yeah, two things. First of all, I'm sorry, it was drag is the square of speed. I think you said speed is the square of drag.
Oh, we did.
Okay, so yeah, so they knew that, I think. Also, there's this birdie thing here, this Microraptor. The people at the American Museum, Mark Norell, and 3 Chinese scientists from China, they spent a ton of money trying to make it work. You know how they have the feathers on both the legs and the arms, and they finally found they didn't hold all the arms out straight and their legs out straight. They held the arms out as a bird would, but their legs were held down and the feathers came out to the side. So they generated lift surfaces like this. The front wing and the rear legs, which was actually a more stable design than if they had just 2 wings, one here and one there. So it's like the damn bird, whatever this creature was, actually really work with the flight point. It's really quite amazing. This was tested in wind tunnels and everything else. And they had engineers there who thought the paleontologists were idiots, and the paleontologists thought the engineers didn't know anything about birds, but they actually did a lot of testing on this, so it's been
Very good job.
Oh, God, it's Jesus. Well, thank you.
Write your name on it.
Yeah, write my name on it, return it. He's got me working here, you know, he's got me stuff I have to do.
So now when it comes to soaring, you can also see some similarities between birds and, in this case, sailplanes, or also known as gliders. Can someone name some favorable traits for soaring birds and gliders, some things that you'd be looking for, some things that might be necessary for soaring aviators as opposed to power-propelled aircraft?
Long wing, strong wing,
Why?
easy to sort.
Why?
Force, the drag, the depth.
Right, and also they're getting more surface area in the lift. So they're flying a lifting air mass, so they're getting more surface area. Please put that back. So some of the things you're looking at high aspect ratio wings. So soaring birds will generally have longer wings than propelling birds. There's an advantage to better at soaring. The disadvantage is a little less maneuverable. So sparrow has little wings, but the thing can zip in and out and between branches and evade predators. Both soaring birds and soaring aircraft have very streamlined aspects. The soaring aircraft will often be made out of composite materials, so they're very, very smooth. Soaring birds will have smoothly overlapping feathers. Also, they'll have winglets to reduce wingtip vortices. Familiar with wingtip vortices? I guess not. Well, gliders, they started putting winglets on. That makes it almost like an infinitely longer wing. It reduces wingtip vortices, so that greatly reduces drag. Well, soaring birds don't spread out their wingtips and make each of their outer primary feathers when they're soaring turn into like mini winglets. So they reduce wingtip vortices by doing that. They'll also have a high lift-to-drag ratio because of the layout, and it's only pretty well maneuverable, at least without flapping. Or the glider will be able to turn and maneuver possibly better than the average aircraft. All right, so that wraps up this discussion of evolution of flight in both aircraft and natural organisms. And so I'd like to open up to any other questions. And you can first ask questions specifically about this topic, but then I'm open to any kind of questions about general aviation and birds in general.
Am I supposed to still rate them on questions at this point?
Yes.
Tricycle planes with tricycles, 3 wheels. Why is it that it has one wheel in the front and 2 in the back? I would think the one wheel in the front is more likely to break.
That's actually because that's not how they land. Did you watch the video at the beginning? You land on the. Airplanes always land on the main wheels. It's just the third wheel is the accessory wheel, whether it's in the back or the front. You're only using that for ground maneuverability. You're using it to turn around the ground. You're using it to keep some of the weight off. So you've got to rest it somewhere. I mean, you can't be like a unicycle where you're bouncing back and forth on a single wheel. Unless you're a glider. Gliders do that. Gliders will bounce on one wheel, and then they'll fall onto a skid on their tail, and then a skid on their wing. So then they will bounce, but you can't taxi like that. So in order to be able to taxi, you have to have an accessory wheel, whether it's in the front or the back. When it's in the back, those planes are very maneuverable. They can turn around themselves. But the disadvantage is when they're landing, the pilot can't see, and it doesn't work as good when you try to scale them up into bigger aircraft. Any other questions? Anyone have any other questions? I'll take that.
Do you have any others than A and C, or do you think?
Just A, B's, and C's. It's just a way to name the points.
So why do gliders have 2 wheels? Why do gliders have only 2 wheels?
Gliders will actually usually only have 1 wheel. You can bring up a picture if let's see if that picture had it. They usually just have 1 main wheel. They only need 1 wheel. I mean, most gliders weigh between 500 and 1,000 pounds. not that much. This one has retractable here, but the wheel would be right here. Usually they'll also have a little tail wheel here, but it might be a skid. Not very important. On the wingtips, they'll either have little wingtip wheels or skids. So mainly a glider is only going to land on one wheel. Why? It's in perfect balance. When it's landing, it's still flying. So when you're transitioning from flight to roll, the wings are still producing lift, even though the plane is landing. They're still producing enough lift that they balance themselves and not even fall down until you're below 5 miles an hour. So the glider will just roll like a unicycle, then eventually the tail will come to rest or the nose wheel will come to rest, depending on the configuration. And then eventually, once it stops, it'll just tip onto one wing. Since it's not taxiing around under its own power, that's not important. There's no engine, so the pilot will get out and move it by hand or use a tractor to pull it. They only need one wheel to land on. Truman.
All those 3 points to the back. You can't keep that.
Other questions? Yes.
Are there any animals that have evolved wheels or no?
Well, no, that's a biological constraint. You can't really have rotating structures in the animal kingdom. So you can't have propellers and wheels. So they have to come up with other means of other than rotational motion. So they have legs that they land on. They have primary wing feathers that they propel themselves with rather than propellers. You guys can pass around the bag of feathers and you can take a look. There's a bit of a samples from these. These are all Truman's feathers. He molted them out and pulled them out of him.
Like, where do the constraints come from?
Genetics.
Biological. The genetics themselves biological constraints. You can't grow a rotating structure out of yourself because everything has to be attached. To have nerve endings and bones and other structures. It's a biological constraint. You can't have rotating structure.
By the way, it's the same thing. Say you have rotating. Can you have an electric wire going into a rotating? Just a wire going into a rotating object? No, it will twist itself off unless you have a commutator. By the way, there's an exception. He's absolutely wrong. At the cellular level, there are rotary axial pivots in living things. The tail of the sperm doesn't wiggle back and forth like a lift. It rotates like a screw. It actually has a rotating chemical joint. But that's it. In no multicellular animals, I can't think of any. I don't think any of you can. And, this is like rotation, but it's not really an axial rotation like a wheel on a car. Can't think of no animals develop wheels.
Also, didn't show this earlier. This is a pterosaur cast. This is Pterodactylus kochi from the Upper Jurassic, about 150 million years ago, in Sollenhofen limestone in Bavaria, Germany. So this one was about the size of a sparrow. So they didn't have to be huge like dinosaurs. Humans seem to have a fascination with the big ones. It might be just because those are the ones we happen to find because they're big enough to preserve. But there were small ones, and smaller ones were probably the more efficient flyers. So I'll let people come up and take a look at these after this list.
Sit. Okay. So, hey, this is working.
There's other questions? Yes.
I know you said that those feathers are molted. How often do the birds molt?
They'll have cycles with my pet parrots. Their cycles a little messed up. In nature, it'll be driven by seasons, so it'll be either once or twice a year. Usually they'll molt right before they mate, but because I have lights in the house and the temperature is constant, it messes up their cycle. So usually about 9 months to a year. They'll eventually replace. They'll replace 2 feathers at a time, symmetrically. So on Kili, actually, I'll show you. If you look at the outer tip primaries, there's a new one coming in on each side, right here and right here. So it's only halfway grown. So she's actually growing new feathers on either side. So they'll fold out symmetrically and they'll grow in symmetrically. Makes sense for them to grow symmetrically. Otherwise, it might disbalance them in flight. She's also molting on her tail. There's a little new tail feather coming in that's growing here as well. So it's actually very interesting about the way the feathers grow. I'm not going to get too much into it, but the follicle, they'll grow a pin out. The feather will grow inside. The outer sheath will break off, and then the feather will uncurl and emerge from that. So it's a very fascinating structure and a lot of evolution involved in the way it's developed from previous structures.
How long does it take to get fully grown?
For the feather, or?
Yeah, for the feather.
About a week or 2. I mean, I think she. I first saw this feather coming in maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and it's maybe 2/3 of the way there. So about a week or 2, and we'll get there. Other questions?
Have you ever been harassed by creationists before?
No, I wouldn't say so. it's interesting, and, by looking at the questions, looking at some of the misconceptions and things that people might not understand, by bringing all the evidence and putting it together, assuming that the audience doesn't understand, start from the ground up and try to look at it from a wider perspective. I think it makes things make more sense rather than making assumptions and assuming that people know things. I, of course, assume that since you're all here in college, you must have at least taken high school biology, you've at least heard what evolution is, that I'm not going to need to explain that from the beginning. I wanted to really focus on evolution of flight, whether it's in organisms or in manned vehicles. We also offer free packages.
52 pickup point. 50 to pick up point.
I don't know what, I got.
I brought some charts and some other pilot supplies with me. And, if someone wants to take them at the end, you're welcome to. Might just show some things. I mean, in case you're interested in some of the things that the pilots use. For instance, we have these, generally use these sectional and terminal area charts. This is the way a aviation map would look like. This is a VFR visual flight rules map. Right here, this might look kind of familiar place. There's Brooklyn, Manhattan, Hudson River. So these maps are kind of different from marine maps or car maps, street maps, because they're more concerned with obstacles, airports, and airspace rather than specific roads or routes. So the rings you see, these are airspace boundaries of JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. And this tells pilots what kind of rules you have to fly based on different areas. So you can pass that one around. You can take a look, and if someone wants to keep one, you can take some of these down. These are expired, so I can give them out. They expire every 2 to 6 months, depending on the kind of chart, so we have to replace them on a regular basis. This, on the other hand, this is an IFR instrument, low altitude chart, and it doesn't have much on it, just has a bunch of lines and some circles. So these are known routes, these are prepared areas, and they're based on older technology, based on ground stations, VORs, and radio beacons. So they, pilots will fly these routes from radio station to radio station. Now we use a lot of GPS, but we'll still fly these routes because it helps with organization. When you can name the route you're going to fly to ATC, it makes it a lot easier for them, as opposed to just arbitrary destinations from one point to another. So pass this around, take a look at it. That's the other way. Pass this around. It's a sectional. It's like the terminal area chart, but it's just more zoomed out. It's a bigger scale. This, on the other hand, these are terminal procedures. These are, we call them IFR plates. We use these for landing at airports under instrument flight rules. That's when the visibility is insufficient to see the airport from the sky. You might have to descend the clouds or haze. So these will illustrate procedures and navigational systems to fly instrument approaches. So we're able to fly without visibility to an extent until a certain point. So these will establish minimums that we fly to, and the courses and the navigational aids to do. So you can pass these around. This is Pennsylvania, so you can take a look at it.
By the way, I hope people make sure you look at his T-shirt. I know it looks like you have to go to a ball since you're supposed to have red, showing the 4 forces acting on a plane, but he has a slightly different version of those forces. Well, you can see it from the back, so on the way out, you'll get a kick out.
Have you ever played any flight simulator computer or video games?
Yes, I mean, I've always been fascinated about flight since early childhood. Birds and flight is always something I was very interested in. So
He did remote control aircraft building. Remote control flight.
Yeah, so I did Microsoft Flight Simulator since like '98. I guess.
I have 98. I still have my 98.
So I used to do that. I've also I learned a lot about it before I get started. I used to build model controlled airplanes and gliders, and I started with gliders. First things I flew were gliders. Then I got an airplane rating. Then I got a commercial glider rating. I got an instrument rating. So I've just been learning and doing more and more flying in various aircraft. Other questions? Yes.
So you mentioned there are situations where you have to land without any visibility, right?
Not quite any visibility, there usually be a minimum, so it might be, let's say, 400 feet ceiling, so that it can't be clouds below 400 and maybe 1 or 2 miles visibility. It'll be prescribed in the chart. So the lowest minimum is usually 200 feet of height and a half mile for a precision approach. So it'll be prescribed by the type of approach. So we do have to eventually see the runway, so we do have to see it to land on it, but this will guide us to as close to the runway as possible. Just really impatient, so show us some tricks. So, wave.
On your shirt, what is supposed to be the drag?
Reality.
FAA. Okay, for those who can't see, the plane has 4 forces on it. 1, money makes it go fast. Dreams make it rise. And that's lift. FAA, Federal Aviation, is the one that puts a drag on everything. And reality is what makes it fall.
What goes up must come down.
Yeah. Reality. But notice the dreams make it fly.
Truman!
Oh, both of them. Well, she went down.
Yeah, I got them really worked up and ready for this, so now that they want to show off, they didn't get their chance.
Was it difficult to train them?
Yeah, the birds, I mean, they're pretty smart for good and for bad. The good thing is that they can learn complicated stuff. The bad thing is they're so smart that they're going to make you feel like an idiot and outsmart you when you're trying to teach them one thing and they're teaching you something else while you're at it. Like, you're trying to get them to do something and they'll bite you and you give in and they're just teaching you to do what they want instead. So it can be difficult animals to work with. Sure. Wings. Wings. Good. All right. Kili. Hello. Wings. Shake. Nod. Wave. Hello.
She's the bully.
Yeah, she's a drama queen, but she loves attention. Truman's still young. I don't think he's just been conditioned to attention to that extent, but he loves being handled. She likes being touched and held, and so she'll look and play with her wings or hold her and do things like that. Truman is a little bit more hands-offish and kind of a little more bold and wants to do his thing. So, but Kili will bully her around. She kind of has her own way of doing it.
Drama queen.
Yeah. Other aviation-related questions?
Or bird.
For bird.
But also, there are airports where these small planes will have restaurants. So you fly and you land. You drive into a parking lot for planes. You look for a space. You park your plane. You walk into the restaurant. Come out. Get the plane. Fly away. The little planes are so much different than the big airlines. Also, there's no homeland security. You don't have to strip search you. No orifice searches.
I don't know about the no orifice searches. Actually, it was funny because some of my friends and I were talking. They want to fly down to some place in Pennsylvania to shoot skeet, and one of the guys asked me, "Can I bring my shotgun with me on the plane?" And everyone's like, "Well, why not? It's your plane. The TSA's not going to check you." So if the guy has the permits to carry his firearm in the car and to get to the plane, it's his own plane. He's operating on Part 91. He can bring whatever he wants. It's his discretion.
You get very spoiled doing this because they also have to wait online to get into the terminals. You come into a separate terminal.
They bring the car. They bring the car.
They bring the car to you, the rental car. They'll take them back. I mean, compared to commercial at some point, I don't think I'll ever fly. I'd rather drive across the country at this point. And it's, of course, and he's a very serious pilot. This is the guy I mentioned before. And I think I definitely feel as safe with you as commercial. I understand they have a lot more gadgets and help if necessary, but, I think a lot of them doze off more. I know you don't doze. I don't doze either. Anyway, but it's a kind of fun thing. And they're expensive. These planes are expensive. He pays a lot. How much to change an oil? And oil?
Oil change about $250.
$250 to change an oil.
If you can do it yourself, it's about 100 in materials.
Yeah. How much did that starting engine cost you? Well, you needed it.
Starter there replaced. Starter was about 500. But also need an impulse coupling replacement.
All right, so you can see these things are very expensive to maintain.
So you own your own plane?
Yeah, the red and white one that you saw in the video.
So how much does it cost to rent? Is it like a rent-a-center for cargo?
Yeah, there is. You can. How
Yeah.
about that pipe out?
All right, just a second. She's doing patient to show off, so I'm going to just show you guys this real quick. All right, one second. Bang!
Notice the little stimuli he's using to signal. Yeah, the click is one, but he also has certain hand gestures. He's a good trainer. He has a blog. You should tell him your powered blog.
Oh, okay. Clear enough on there.
And he's also interested in training, obviously, and behavioral, behavioral learning, psych stuff, and the Aaron Chinese use. As you can see, evolution. By the way, I did not know what this talk would be. I have no idea. It's not what I thought it would be. But Michael, I think it was very good. Excellent. But, I thought it was going to be more airplanes.
Sorry.
Well, it's fine, but he never tells me. In fact, he won't let me even see what his Xerox gave me. I have a special lab open after the class, and he's got me working for it. So, it's...
That's my parrot training blogs if anyone's interested more about parrots specifically, and I might end up posting the video of today's session up on YouTube, and that'll be on that site as well.
Also, do you have a flight blog to a site?
It's not like blog, but there's a page of my videos. It's YouTube. So all the videos you saw today, and then some others you can see on that YouTube page. I'm keeping a little bit separate. There's also some videos of the parrots flying in planes.
Are there any chat groups for people interested in aviation who may not be pilots or general aviation discussions? Probably just for pilots.
Probably are, but I don't know. I don't really not into that sort of stuff. I can show you.
Yeah, I see. You should have told me about the evolution thing. I would have given a little prep because they had none of that in this class. Nothing.
Well, they're college students. They will at least.
I know. I think they did okay. And also, they probably do some. But so don't yell at me. By the way, you're required to take your notes and understand this could be on the future test. This is a real class. But I would have prepped you a little had I known. You wouldn't tell me.
I'll just send a picture.
Was that the one from Leonard's desk? Should have said that. Now let it know. So Truman, he beats you up. He's such a big bird.
Here's Kili, my co-pilot. Helps me out. Reminds me to put the wheels
Right.
on.
He takes the birds in the plane with him. Imagine the complete
Reminds me to put the wheels on.
incongruity of that.
Screw up.
Birds
Sitting there.
flying in an
Don't screw up. Don't screw up with my feathered butt on line. Don't make a bad landing.
See, the birds could never fly as fast as you. What's the fastest flight?
Yeah, by the way, that's actually something I wanted to mention. That's one of the constraints that birds have, is that they're well built for slower flight, but they can never achieve the kind of speed we get our planes to go because of the rotating propulsion and stronger structures. So there is a lot of development that does go into aviation that goes beyond where birds are at. It does help us learn and appreciate and understand the basics of man-made aeronautics and design by understanding how birds fly as well.
What's the fastest, I think, in a dive?
Peregrine falcon can dive.
That's in a dive.
But that's them being a bullet. They'll flip their wings completely in, so that's not even flight. Propelled flight, the Canadians, they'll probably do a good 70 miles an hour.
Panther geese? Those things that poop everywhere?
They're very well built for long-term sustained flight. They'll be doing 50 to 70 miles an hour in the air, but they're going to fly with tailwinds. They take advantage of jet stream, so they could be doing 200 or 300 miles an hour over the ground. They spot them over 20,000, 30,000 feet high. And this is another aspect of their respiratory system, those air sacs, that lets them breathe in thinner air. Another little fact that I forgot to mention was that back when pterosaurs were evolving into birds, it's believed that the atmosphere, dinosaurs were evolving into birds, that the atmosphere was actually thicker. So it's kind of like swimming in the ocean versus swimming in a pool or a lake. So the buoyancy would be a little better, so they were able to get away with slightly more inferior structures to be able to fly. I believe that the air density was somewhat different.
Also, it isn't true that Canadian geese, the places they mainly like to land is in airfields, and they await the...
You get one, take one too.
Finally, thank you. I can look at it now.
Yeah, you have to fill it out.
Oh my God. I got to take the test. There you go.
Just make sure that everyone gets one.
What did you study while at college?
Yes.
He hated this
No,
place.
isn't that what it was called, like business something, or, I don't know,
BMS? No, BMS.
Yeah, that's the one. I got a BS and BS.
Did you have a Professor Katz or no?
Yeah, Daniel Katz?
Did,
Yeah, he's my my instrument rating.
yeah, he mentioned this. I asked him about, how to get the line. He mentioned you.
Yeah, he helped me work on my commercial glider ground school and my instrument rating. He signed me up for it.
Only after you graduated.
Yeah. Yeah, he wouldn't fly with me before. He's like, well, he's so paranoid about liability issues and whatnot. He let me fly his plane with him though, so. Wings. Stretch.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's some extras. Everyone get one? Let's make sure you screw up.
Okay, yeah, you should take it on. Hey, Truman, what's the answer to number?
Truman!
What's the answer to number 4, Truman? Thanks a lot. You gonna help me?
Yeah, he left answer number 4 in his shirt.
You're kidding.
Yeah, kidding. Kili. Truman!
Right, we didn't discuss number 7.
I didn't, I thought I was ready not to have this issue. Truman!
Can you do the same thing with them outdoors?
No, I take them with a leash when I go outside. Just, you know what, 99.9% of the time it's no problem. They'll stay by me and comply with me. But if they get spooked or something, someone scares them, car blows a tire or something like that, I might take off. And in the city, they'll end up like 2-3 blocks away. And someone's back there, I'll never find them. You know, it's too urban.
I got a question. Have you ever been driving through New Jersey and seen those low-flying planes road signs?
Well, I'll be flying the low flying tonight, so.
Like, what are you really supposed to do when you see that as a road sign?
Well, you know what it is that sometimes, I might have a video of this, but, you know, there'll be a runway that says this is a runway, and there's a road that passes right before the runway, and so if like a truck or some big car, if they stop right here at the stoplight or they're going slow, they're right on our road path. It might be really, really close, maybe close to a couple of minutes. It might scare them. First of all, so they don't get scared. So if you're driving along, listening to music, suddenly see it only 10 feet over, you don't wet your pants. But second of all, it's also, you know, maybe you could be a little bit more aware if you're in a vehicle, but don't linger there, you know, watch out for planes. There are places where we land like, there's a road and then the runway starts like right after the road, so it'll be really close. Truman.
My test always say cross through. It
Well,
says circle.
well, it says-
So I said what all you people do to me. You acted it the wrong way.
You can't even pay attention to directions.
No, well, they don't either, so we're all used to each other. Anyway,
Truman.
Michael, I can't remember your test. He was my student here in different courses, and he was a B student. But...
Truman! Yeah, that was a B without even cracking the book open or coming to
All
class.
right, right. That must have been the case over the weekend. No, there were A's, but there's also some errors. Yeah. Oh, Michael, here's your score on the students.
Okay.
You did well. Let me just get these finals.
I was Let me just say this.
One of them.
I was trying to, there was more that I was trying to analyze, but I ended up getting lost in the presentation, and it was hard to follow that. So I'm glad I at least got to do this, because I would have totally forgotten.
Yeah, well, that's kind of makes it plus or minus one there.
Sure, no, it's good, it's good enough.
Can I look at this now? You're going to take it away from me.
It's finished. What happened to these?
Oh, I can talk to you. I think I can do it. Just leave.
Wait a minute, you didn't put your name on it. I guess this person doesn't get their grade in. I don't even know.
Okay, I'll leave the grade for you. This is nice. Where did you get this and how much?
Are you buying?
What's it called again?
Pterodactylus elegans. Should be. Kochi. I'm sorry, it's not elegans, it's Kochi. Cute.
I think I got that for like $30 or something. I don't think it was that much. I think that one was around 100 and this was about 30. I think I paid some, I don't know, I got like a combo.
They also get very ratings here. I should be supporting the work. It's bad.
I hold this thing here because I really get so jealous.
Should my case there?
It was a special case. It says I'm saying there's I doubt
No,
that.
it's not. It's
Must be a copy of a copy.
by the way, this is the
I think suit costs more than that.
6 million. This is probably 10, 12 million. No, the Sue is 8 million. No, this is probably 10. Can't land in the mold bed. I'm using this as their evaluation.
We don't know yet. What did I tell you?
You told me to tell them something when we go
I
on.
told you it may or may not be.
Okay, but did you say that before the beginning of class?
I think people know that.
Yeah, I want to see. Okay, you know what a Brazil nut is? It's a really hard nut. You ever have to break them open?
Why is it brown one?
The brown one's not a Brazil nut.
It's a Brazil nut.
This is a Brazil nut. Now, as a kid, I was in trouble with these. Watching a true expert in action. I used to use a hammer on these. When I was a kid, I couldn't even use a nut cracker.
Birds! Hey, birds!
He gave her the almond, which is the easy one. Gave him the Brazil nut. One. Come on, you can do it. I want to see this.
Turn.
He said they have 300 pounds per square inch impact, and it's on a knife edge. So it's breaking open the shell. Those things are really hard to presume.
It'll take them a little while, maybe we'll have to turn to them.
You must be familiar with the story of Darwin's finch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like that.
But he wasn't involved to eat Brazilian nuts. I mean, you have Brazilian nuts in Brazil. This is an African bird, so. No, like he got it. He just broke he broke that piece up. Now he's just gonna build it out. He's just gonna use it to hook this build it, break it out. The rest is easy. I mean, getting it started is the hard part. No, that's
As
what
I
it
tell
is.
you, it should be a hammer. It's not easy getting it.
See, for her, almond is about as hard as the design is.
Yeah, because the almond is considerably easier.
Yeah, with a beak of that size,
It's
though.
got a little baby beak,
She can't fit the whole thing in her mouth, you know, so.
I never knew that birds had like hand like structure. I
Well,
know.
this is pretty unique to parrots. Most other birds won't do this. Maybe owls will hold their prey in their talons. They'll hold them one talon, kind of eat it out of the talon. But parrots are probably the most agile and used to put their feet in this place and hands. One of the things they need to be able to do is the fact that they have those the claw that I explained, the zygodact feet, where the feet went around, the claws go around the other way, with 2 claws each way, so they can hold on with that. Of course, as I showed you with this before, you know, it's still not as intelligent or as convenient of a design as having Truman with arms. Wouldn't he be even better off? I mean, if he could only have arms, he'd be writing books, and he wouldn't need to be here to present to him.
It's an interesting conclusion. In the old days, of course, when they assumed that, you know, mammals are superior to dinosaurs, and when the mammals appeared, the dinosaurs went extinct in competition. The problem was the mammals, in fact, appear about the same time as dinosaurs. Yet for 150 million years, dinosaurs are more successful. So, where do you get the idea that dinosaurs are not as adaptive, not as well adapted? The current view is it's not that. If they had bad luck, they got hit on the head with an asteroid, how can you be ready for that? So, you know, birds being descendants have some incredible adaptations, which in some ways are superior to mammals. So, the current view is, you can't always guarantee just because something's here, it's better adapted.
Yeah, let me mention that 3/4 of the world's land-dwelling living organisms, not bacteria, obviously, are insects and birds. The flighted animals have dominated 3/4, so mammals are quite kind of a
Are
majority.
you talking about number of species or number of individuals or
I think it's
wildness?
both. And the number of species, obviously, when you say insects, but even birds, there's more species of birds than there are mammals, so mammals are kind of a...
But also, there's a bit of a cheat there. If you look at the size of animals overall, regardless of class, small or dwarf. Since all birds are on average smaller than mammals, therefore, there'll be more number of species. But still, yeah, they're pretty good. And, you know, he did a good job, as far as I know.
Does anyone still need more time? I'm hoping to wrap that up.
And by the way, Michael, there's always one, at the last minute.